So the college football transfer portal is one of those things where if you blink, you could miss some action. So much happens so quickly, and today we need to talk about three institutions making major moves. First and foremost, we need to talk about the Nebraska Cornhuskers as Matt Rhule adds in a former blue chip prospect transferring from the Georgia Bulldogs to Nebraska in MJ Sherman. After that, we need to go to the state of Florida where the Florida Gators get some much needed help along the offensive line, and we need to discuss the craziness going on around the Gators. And finally, we need to take a stop in Boulder, Colorado and talk about Coach Prime continuing to get in big wins for that Colorado secondary, something we've got to break down. But before we can, as always, y'all know the drill. I have got to hear from you. Hop down to the comments. Y for yes, N for no. Are you having fun watching these transfer portal moves? And let me know what you think about the transfer portal. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that bell notification. I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to like and comment down below. Those interactions may seem small, but they truly are massive to content creators such as myself. And we're on a push to 20,000 subscribers. I'd love nothing more than to have you a part of this unbelievable community. But having said all that, let's jump right into this. And we're going to start with the Nebraska Cornhuskers, where Matt Rhule has made some big-time moves in the transfer portal, and we need to start with the newest, MJ Sherman, transferring from Georgia to Nebraska. Now, coming out of high school per 24/7 Sports, Sherman was just outside a five-star range, coming in as the number 33 prospect coming out of the D.C. area. This is a big win for the Cornhuskers for multiple different reasons. Even though Sherman may not have a bunch of production coming out of Georgia, what he does have is an understanding of what an elite standard looks like. MJ Sherman is an individual that's seen what a college football team winning at the highest levels of the game looks like. He knows what the rooms are supposed to look like. He knows the work that it takes. If you're Matt Rhule and you're inheriting something where you're going to have to turn around the fate of the Nebraska Cornhusker program, getting in guys such as Sherman are very, very powerful wins. The reason is simple. Because Matt Rhule can vocalize what he wants the standard to be to the players. All coaches do this. But ultimately, it's up to the players to enforce that standard. Matt Rhule can try as much as he wants to enforce the standard, but if the players aren't bought in, it's not going to matter. Getting in a guy from the transfer portal like MJ Sherman that has that innate understanding of what the standard looks like at the highest level, he can help implement that for all of the younger guys, and that's why I think this is such a powerful addition. Secondly, sometimes a change of scenery is really powerful for some of these guys. One thing we need to understand is if you're coming from an institution like Georgia, like Alabama, like Ohio State, these places stack talent so successfully that you can be on that depth chart and not really get the ability to play and still be a very talented college football player. You can go to an institution like Nebraska coming from Georgia and really boom in your career. And hopefully that's what we see from Sherman. I love stories like that. That Georgia defense is so stacked top to bottom. We can go through, list off all the talent, and it's head spinning how much talent Kirby Smart has been able to accrue. But you're able to accrue that whenever you have the results he's been able to field. So, hats off to the Georgia Bulldogs for the season they've had. I've said it multiple times, but if you are a Nebraska fan, I love this move for all the reasons we've listed. But we need to look outside of this move very briefly because the Cornhuskers have gotten some other really intriguing additions. We look at the quarterback out of Georgia Tech, Jeff Sims. One of the moves I think has really flown under the radar that people need to be talking about a little bit more. And on top of that, you get Billy Kemp from Virginia, who's been a very, very productive wide receiver in his collegiate career, amassing 1,774 yards throughout the entirety of his career. He gets another year of eligibility, transfers to Nebraska with Sims. Very intrigued to see what that looks like. Hopefully the Nebraska Cornhuskers' future and fate can get turned around because that's a fan base that wants nothing more than the dominance of old to come back, and hopefully Matt Rhule can be that guy. He did great work with Baylor. Really excited to see what he does with the Nebraska Cornhuskers. But now we need to transition from the Big Ten to the SEC, where the Florida Gators get some much-needed help along the offensive line as a former member of the Alabama Crimson Tide, Dameion George, has announced his intention to transfer from Alabama to Florida. And the Gators need all the help they can get along that offensive line. Once again, Dameion George may not have been a starter at the University of Alabama, though he did start in 3 games, I believe. But he has some experience. He's an individual that, like we just talked about with Sherman, he understands what the standard looks like. I know people can come into the comments and say Alabama had a down year, they had 2 losses. Any other college football program coming off of a 2-loss season with a bowl win where they slaughtered a conference champion, that coach would be getting a raise. We'd be talking about their future going into the next year. But because the standard Alabama has set for themselves, that's a disappointing season. And that alone proves the inherent point I'm trying to make here. Dameion George was a part of that. The standard he has become accustomed to is not the standard the rest of college football is accustomed to. And if you're Florida, if you're Billy Napier, and especially in that offensive line room, you need guys that are going to be able to push everybody else. You need to create competition. Iron sharpens iron, and hopefully that's the mantra Billy Napier and the Gators are going after here. But even though this isn't having to do with the transfer portal, we do need to briefly talk about the Jaden Rashada situation, because what a situation this is. College football is not short on drama, and the Jaden Rashada situation is one we have got to watch going forward. For those not in the know, top quarterback coming out of high school, Jaden Rashada, was committed to Miami, ultimately flipped from Miami to Florida, and many people wondered whether NIL had something to do with it. Well, fast forward to now, and there's a lot of drama going on. Jaden Rashada, who signed his letter of intent, has reportedly requested a release, something that he has disputed, something that the family has disputed, but what we do know is that he is not currently on campus for Florida, and reportedly there are disputes with his NIL deal. And if you're the Florida Gators, if you get a collective together and you tell a prospect, we're going to pay you this amount of money, I don't care if in a month you realize you're going to overpay that kid. You've already agreed to do so. And the one reason this is so bad for Florida is there are other collectives that are figuring this out. And the last thing you want in the era of NIL is to be known as the institution that's collective cannot get it together, because that's not going to bode well for the future. Whenever you have a prospect wondering what NIL capabilities you can offer as opposed to another institution. Because now Florida is on the books as having an issue. Hopefully this gets resolved. It is absolutely something we need to watch, because this could be very impactful for how NIL is done across college football. So keep this situation at the forefront of your minds. This is not the last time we will speak on it. We will be talking about this again very shortly, but kind of refocusing back on the Dameion George situation before we transition from Florida to Colorado. This is such a big win because of the mass exodus Florida had in that offensive line. 2 individuals declaring for the draft, 2 individuals declaring for the transfer portal. The only guy left is the center. So Florida has got a lot of work to do on that offensive line. Really interested to see what the Gators look like next year. It's going to be a big year for Napier. And finally, we need to stop in Colorado, where Coach Prime continues to get big wins in the secondary, adding in former Ole Miss cornerback Kendrick Breedlove. And this is a big win. Breedlove is an individual that saw a lot of action his freshman season, but unfortunately, injury essentially derailed the entirety of his sophomore campaign, having to deal with a wrist injury. When he entered the transfer portal, there were a lot of suitors. Institutions such as Kentucky, institutions such as Texas A&M were very interested, and deservedly so. This kid has got some high upside, but ultimately, it's the Colorado Buffaloes that win this battle. And we've said this ad nauseum, but I'm going to say it again because it must be said in this instance. If you're a defensive back, I'm not inherently surprised if you decide to go and play for Coach Prime. What is so awesome to see is the talent he's been able to stack through the transfer portal, and this is the beauty of the transfer portal. The transfer portal affords new coaches an opportunity that was not present 5-6 years ago to quickly acquire talent that may have an understanding of what it takes to make that transition from high school football to college football. I give this spiel all the time. High school football and college football may as well be different games entirely. Yes, it's the game of football, but it's a different game entirely. The difference in size, speed, strength, technique required to be successful at the college game, it's exponentially more than what it requires at the high school game. Getting in guys that have successfully made that transition gives you more faith that you can hit the ground running. And that's why I think it's so key what Coach Prime and Colorado have been doing. They sit as a top 5 class in transfer portal acquisitions, and they are getting some big additions in it. And Breedlove is now a part of a defensive backroom that I think all of college football is going to be watching intently, especially if Coach Prime and Colorado are able to flip Kermani McClain. That would send college football in a frenzy, something, I hate to break it to you, you may need to prepare yourself for. I have no information on the situation, only my opinion. I think the writing was on the wall whenever the Miami coaching staff went to the Lakeland High School on Friday to visit Kermani McClain, and he wasn't there. He was on a visit. Personally, I think the writing is on the wall. If Miami wins that battle out, great win for Mario Cristobal and the Canes. Kermani McClain is an incredible player, but I'm so interested to see what this Colorado team looks like. Hop down to the comments. Let me know what you're thinking. That's it. See ya.